Hey guys, how's it going? Hopefully you guys can hear us now. Welcome to the recognition AMA. Hopefully you guys can hear us. If there's any problems, just let me know and I can fix it on my end. I am here with the group that was working on the recognition, and we're here to answer some questions today. So are we doing good? We're supposed to start the stream, not the boot. That's one for wearing. That's true. It's unfortunately a multi-step process to get these things going. So hopefully everything sounds good. I'm gonna let everyone here say hello real quick and what they have done on the recognition guide or what part they were here, so we know who's with us today. Joshua, why don't you start?
Sure. Joshua Franklin, and I got started making some of the OmniMech configurations and designing a couple of the new mechs, and then got asked to write a couple entries for the series. I also made the Hellbringer a scout, which is apparently my claim to fame now.
Joe?
Hi, I'm Johannes Heidler, the odd one out in terms of language here. I'm the TRO developer, so I've done a little bit of everything on this, and was there at the beginning, but so were most of these guys, well, all of them, yeah.
Matt?
I'm Matt Wilsbacher. I mostly did record sheets for the series. I also did a little bit of writing and a couple of OmniMech designs as well. So,
Keith?
Pretty similar. Some more fluff entries than actual designs. Only one design, the fabulous train wreck, that is the cricket. And otherwise, though, plenty of the fluff entries. I will cover them, I suppose, as we dig into the anime.
And Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Wheeler. I've mainly worked on the design side of things, done a bit of writing as well. Just odds and sods, really, just whatever's needed. So.
And then Lance.
Hi, the name is Scarinci, like Da Vinci, in case anybody gets questions. I did a few designs, including the Sojourner and the Hyro Falcon, and a large number of fluff, thanks to Joe.
So this is who we got today. These are great guys who work on a lot of, little bit of everything, it sounds like, from inside the book, from, not just the recognition guide, but just some of the other books in general, right? So it's kind of sound like.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So there are plenty of, answers to questions that we can probably answer today in today's AMA. So I think I'm going to start with the one that I saw before stream that I saw Keith, maybe saying that someone was fired, was what's up with the secret Wolverine presence running throughout the Rec Guide series?
Well, if I told you that, Johannes would have to kill me. But of course, yeah, ask him, because he's the one who's plotting it out. He's the master behind it all. So he's more than happy to go over it at some length. Johannes loves this stuff.
Nah, dodging the responsibility, I
all
see.
Wolverines all the time.
Should we speak about Clan Punisher now, or something else? No, but yeah, Etienne is a lovely guy who loves to make jokes. Yeah.
I posted on the BattleTech forums as I come bug us and ask about the secret Wolverine presence, and he decided to take me at my word.
So it is you. Okay, back to you then.
There are a lot of Wolverines, but they're all the mechs.
Yeah. So
They're everywhere.
let's I know as questions are rolling, as a couple of questions are rolling here in the beginning. Let's start with a really easy one. What was your favorite thing working on the recognition guide? What was something that stood out to you? That's something you really enjoyed about working on it?
I like.
Okay.
Anyone?
Yeah, someone take the floor.
Oh,
Sure, I'll go ahead.
Nope, I'm passing Joshua.
I actually got to do something with the Kestrel Grenadiers, so that was always been a favorite unit of mine. I'd used the nickname Kestrel since before I even introduced the BattleTech, so any chance I get to do anything with the Kestrel Grenadiers, that was fun in writing the Inferno entry. So that was always a nice little side path.
Well, I was happy that I got to do some mechs that don't get a lot of glory, like the Oz Scout and the Stinger. I got to try to fluff them up in a way that was interesting, other than this mech ran out and got shot and killed, or this mech ran away. So there was some fun doing that.
Yeah, it's hard writing for something like, say, the Locust and trying to make it sound like a badass, right? Like, how do you make a notable Locust pilot? You know, just he didn't die in the first 5 minutes; he lasted 10 minutes. So, but those are fun.
Yeah, I think some of the fun's been on the design side of things has been creating different variants of the mechs just to go to places where they've not been before. If, for example, you've had a short range mech, perhaps doing a version with long range weapons, just doing things that haven't been done before, just a bit of variety, if anything else. So
Yeah, there is a big challenge in coming up with something different, but not just making it a train wreck. Just taking something,
Yeah.
especially something that has 20 or 30 variants already, and
yeah,
make
it needs to be
interesting out of it.
different and do something, doesn't it? It doesn't need to be just different for the sake of being different. It's got to be a functional mech at the end of the day. Otherwise, what's the fun? There's no fun playing it.
You especially keep me honest that way, Chris, all the time.
I try. I certainly try. We've had
But
many discussions on different variants of mechs, omni mechs, and configurations. Certainly.
Oh.
So yeah.
Matt, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, it's actually all your fault, Joe, why this one is my particular favorite. This fine little gentleman right here, the Huntsman, has been my favorite machine in the game for several decades now, since I first picked up 3058. And you were foolish enough to let me write the entry for that thing. So that was far and away my best joy working on this series right now. So
I did not know that so emphatically. Well, I love that. Obviously, I don't know how. Maybe we'll speak about that tonight a little bit more, how the whole scope of the whole thing developed. But initially, Ray came to me and said, how do we make it relevant? Basically, the Kickstarter happening and all the unseens now being classics and being back in the universe in a shape that's not Project Phoenix. And initially I focused on that entirely in the project before it became something much bigger and something serialized. Initially it was all about the classics, so ultimately that's the biggest joy for me, to have the honor to look at these are the foundation of BattleTech, these machines basically, and to do something with them, not just in terms of the game, but in terms of the lore, and bring them into the current universe and build the bridge between the Kickstarter and the current universe, because there's 100 years there. And the very first expansion of the project was looking at the 2Cs that are all so technically, well, they have unseen status, and as such go into the whole thing that's called classics now. And I personally, well, TRO 3055 was my first BattleTech book ever. So in terms of just emotional impact, all the clan second line machines that we're doing, they are really, really special to me. Yeah.
We get everybody there? All right. Well, I've seen a whole bunch of questions come in, so let's start diving into some of them before I start getting behind on them. Are the rec guides laying the foundation for an ilClan box set containing the new era mechs? I don't know if it's something you guys can answer or not.
Nope.
Then a nope is it you can't answer, or
A bit of both, but nothing that I'm aware of.
okay. So that'll be something that, you know, sorry, whoever asked that question, try asking it during another AMA, or try and ping us on one of the forums. We'll try and get a better answer for you there. We're not always going to have the answer to every question, just because, you know, obviously we aren't, you know, our hands are in the books and sometimes not in the production of stuff.
We're minions.
So are the new designs going to proliferate more into the periphery as ilClan moves forward?
Yeah, in general, I think we've tried to make a lot of them very widely available. I don't know if there's a specific plan in the next 10 years of BattleTech history for it to expand more, but there was definitely, you know, we were told on the master unit list side to take whatever we can and make it a pretty widely available. These are meant to be main front center focused of a lot of factions. So So they should be fairly widely available.
There's there's a reference I went around with some of the team that I saw for like basically Deus Ex Foxico, where like they will be able to spread everything everywhere, and they have been. So it really makes it convenient since they are not so rooted in a base. They are happy to sell to everyone. So a lot of this stuff you see entries are, and the Sea Foxes are selling X and Y. So certainly there's a good opportunity for rapid spread, but to some degree it's pretty organic, I think. There's not as much, okay, what's going to happen in 10 years or 5 years, or at least that I've seen in the past for BT development. I don't know if that's changing going forward, but it's hard to say when does X hit Y faction beyond what's in the rec guide itself.
Yeah. I mean, in the case of some of the mechs, anyway, they've been around for probably 20, 30 years in universe by 3150. So there's going to be some natural proliferation across that time period.
Well, that's basically, as you said, Joshua, Chris, Keith, I guess, with the Sea Foxes. It's meant to be as generic as we can get without actually unhinging the universe. Rather the exact opposite. We want to flesh it out. We've delved deep into the actual production process without making the write-ups about it, because we've had TROs that focused very heavily on the production and development side of things. We've had TROs that focused very heavily on the action side of things, and the mission statement from 314550 that changed back to the pure action side of things, that still holds for this TRO, but we were still extremely careful to have the whole tapestry of everything sorted out before we went in. So there was a whole lot of planning in which factories were feasible to have all these units that are now suddenly back in the universe, to have them in production, but not just have them in production, but have had them in production for, as Chris said, 20, 30 years, in some rare cases from the end of the jihad, basically. So this TRO needed to address the fact that all these mechs that are recurring will be in our immediate future the most common mechs on the tables, and as such they need to be the most common mechs in the universe as well. And we can't just Deus Ex Sea Fox everything. So there was a lot of planning in that way. Yeah, and Lance hasn't said anything, but he was actually very well, it was your responsibility, Lance, to just make the whole Sea Fox angle work. So whenever we couldn't just make it work with the factories that exist, we feel fleshing out the Sea Foxes more and more and more. And it was actually quite interesting because a lot of the groundwork of their power and their spread had already been laid in all the prior source books since Field Manual 3145, but it hasn't been fleshed out a lot. So by the by, Lance actually did a lot of that in his entries. That's one of your specialties in the project.
Yeah, especially with the stuff that was going to be going to Clan Wolf or the Hammerhead, for example, trying to plant the idea that there was a Sea Fox ship more or less everywhere.
Give me a second here. A lot of questions just flying in right now. trying to grab them before they fly by me. Next one I had was, are we going to see new experimental tech in the rec guides? New armor types, new weapons, etc.?
Battle mech manual stuff.
There you go. We had a mission statement. Well, we had several mission statements going into the project, and one of them was to stick to Keith's magnum opus, to stick to the battle mech manual, which does cover some tech right up to, well, interstellar operations even, but not a lot. It's mainly streamlined to have a core of equipment that works on the table fairly easily. But that was our main parameter, and there's been a few exceptions, but only very few. Like we've had some anti-personal pods, which I don't think are game-breaking, but they're not in the BMM because they concern units other than mechs. Yep.
Well, and I think like Joe said earlier, these are meant to be common mechs. This is supposed to help define the era of what's, these are the miniatures that the Kickstarter has. These are the mechs that all the factions are using. So using, the Battle Mech Manual, the whole point is that this is the common technology of this time. So if we were getting outside that, then that would be by definition a unit that was not very common. This isn't the old, technical readout prototypes where these are individual units that somebody's building as a prototype. These are all common mechs. So we wanted to stick to common technology for them.
The anticipated rec guide compilation, will there be new content, or if we bought them all individually, will we have it all? Basically, is there going to be new stuff in the compilation, or that they would need to go out and buy this for? If they own every rec guide book, are they good to go?
That's a question probably beyond our pay grade, but from every conversation that I've had or that I've been party to, I can guarantee that the intention is there to have it be the same. Obviously, it's not all going to be just in one volume, in one compilation. That's a given. Because all up, it'll be, it might be just doable, but it'll be at least as big as TRO 3085, and these days it would probably cost more than $50, and that's not what's being looked at as far as I know. But in terms of the content that's in the compilation, there's not going to be anything in there that isn't in the 24 rec guides.
All right. Yeah, just be careful about your questions, guys. Obviously, there's a limit to how far-reaching we can get a question with me or these guys being here. I know that you guys don't seem to be anybody's mouths moving while there's chat. I'm Talon. I'm hidden in the background, hosting all the technology to host these AMAs for you guys. So just be careful what questions you ask, because sometimes, it's better answered by somebody like maybe Ray Arestia, who is the Battletech line developer, or Aaron K. Hall, who is the co-Battletech line producer, who would have better answers to those questions. And I do have them on AMAs slated in upcoming AMAs as well. So, next one I have is, could the rec guides be used to publish variants listed in lore, but currently have no record sheets? Things like the SHD 11CS2, Shadowhawk, Giuliano, Orion C, and so on.
I think you did do that a few times, didn't you, Joe?
Absolutely. That Shadowhawk is Project Phoenix Shadowhawk, and we did talk about that very early on in the project. Can we address it very minutely and have various record sheets that have the new illustration and then some Project Phoenix illustrations? And we nixed that idea really, really, really quickly. So that Shadowhawk will have to have its record sheet published elsewhere sometime. Yeah. But we've been digging really deep to find some really obscure stuff. Yeah.
How does someone get involved in contributing to TROs and rec guides? Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good one, because each one of you probably had a different way you came into this in the beginning.
Misfortune, possibly.
Be mistaken for Joshua.
Yeah, wrong place.
Hey, it's your fault I'm in this at all.
I bribed people with food, so that's what I can say.
I think, people don't mind, I think I could give a general answer for this one. Hang out on the official forums. Do something that no person in their right mind would probably want to do. That demonstrates a love of the universe and your ability to commit to a project for a lengthy period of time, and be able to work well with others. You have to be a team player. You have to be able to take editing to say, well, that's great, but it doesn't fit so-and-so, whether it's the developer's idea or some piece of fact checking or something, and so it's got to be cut. Some people don't do well with that. So you have to be willing to have your work changed, axed, whatever. And but I think a lot of people I've seen again and again are the ones who've been hanging on the official forums. They consistently post errata. They do some cool fan project. They do something like that. And from there, it's, hey, I think we could use you. Let's give you a try with something small. And then slowly but surely you build up.
I'd also recommend putting in a submission to Shrapnel, possibly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good review.
In terms of working on a recognition guide, that's not the straightforward way to go. That's probably more to do with the AMA from last month. Shrapnel would not be the avenue to this sort of project. It's really what Keith described. There's nothing elitist about being on the forums at all. It's just the avenue that CGL itself offers and also uses. There was somebody asking a rhetoric question on Facebook that I saw a couple of weeks ago, asking why go to the forums at all, and I just replied something along the lines of official errata, because it's something that CGL has there, and Keith maintains that CGL has there to keep the rules up to date. Footnote, not just to actually have errata, we just call everything errata, but we are actually developing the rules as we go along. So it's not just a whole bunch of oversights, it's actually people there developing the game in minute details because the basic rules haven't changed since 1984. But that's a very participatory way of doing things, and it's open not just to the moderators or to the authors, it's open to everybody who's signed up to the forums. And I'm pretty sure that 3 others in this group have had their starts through that, so exactly as Keith described. And my example, I mean, I've been in this game for a very long time. I was asked to participate in record sheets in 2008 because of the errata that I posted in a very civil and very cooperative way on the forums. And then I was just asked. I didn't try to advertise anything. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple of people in our current audience, even though I'm not looking at the feed, that have also been drawn into various aspects of this project in the last couple of months even. So that's the way of interacting with the fan base at large. It is the official forums, and it's not because it's a secret club. It's because it's our avenue to communicate with the fan base, and it's the secure way of also giving some output from Catalyst side.
Yeah, so it's a lot of these guys, they spend years just loving the game itself on the forums through Facebook, and some of them we hire, some of them we find, and it's a little bit of everything. So there's always a way to get in. It sounds like, but it's all about what you're doing at the time. If you're posting good content, there's a chance from any company's perspective, not just Catalyst, that you'll see work, a chance to work on something that you might love in the future. So kind of what it sounds like, right? So just as another thing, try not to post your questions more than once, because I am taking everything down and just answering them in the order that I'm getting them. We'll try to get them, try to get everything here as we can in the AMA. But if you repost questions, then I accidentally type them down twice. Because I think I saw there was an Anthony Scroggins and Annihilator thing, which we'll get to eventually. But if you've seen, if you already asked your question, I most likely have gotten it. So try not to post them twice, because it screws up what I'm trying to type down. If you would, I know if there is a thing where you have missed it and you're like, hey, it's been a bit, and they obviously didn't get to it, feel free to post it again. But try not to spam your question, because it's a little hard for me to figure out questions I haven't written down yet.
Sorry, lost my connection for a second.
Nope, you're all good. So next question is, how is the creative process to choose the design style of the TROs? Example, the Rec Guide seemed to favor higher speeds for new models and variants using advanced engines and speed boosters.
Well, I know with the ones I have, I mean, the Omni mechs, you're already stuck with whatever you've got. With the other ones, it's probably just part of that push to make it not the same as the other 30 variants. There's definitely not an overall requirement that we make them go faster or anything. I know Joe actually nixed my making the Warhammer go faster. I made the Inferno. I wanted it to be cheap, so I kept it with the standard engine, which means it wasn't going to go that fast. So there's no overall, hey, make it go faster. But I think there is if you're looking for something different than what hasn't been before, there's less supercharger mechs. There's less of those that already exist. So that gives you some options to do something different and not the same thing as has been done before.
It's like you say, Joshua, it's a very by case exercise, because the only TRO, correct me guys, the only TRO that I'm aware of that actually had a mission statement saying, let's look at all different speeds that we can get and implement. Exactly, yeah. 3085. We didn't have that in 3145 at all, 3150. And like the Warhammer. The Warhammer had Project Phoenix variants that went 5.8. All the Deviant Taurian Warhammers have 5.8 and jump movement and whatnot. And we actually really wanted to focus on getting the essence of the classics, the things that they are known for, and even in the starter game in the 80s, just that you open the box set, you have all these mechs, they aren't just different looking mechs, they have different roles. And we tended to focus on what is that initial role and how can we transport that into the modern battlefield. That was the thing that we looked at for this TRO. And well, the Deviant Warhammer had already been done, Joshua. I think that was my reasoning. So
yeah, it wasn't the complaint. It was just, it definitely wasn't a requirement that we make anything go faster or increase the speed of everything across the board.
Yeah, no, that was a great example there. The only exception to that rule, but even that ties into what is the original image, was I wanted the bug mechs to be cheap, and you guys, but also Ray, wanted the bug mechs to be fast. And that's the only time we actually even talked about that sort of dimension of speed versus other factors. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, specifically with the bug max, then it was more of a case of they were fast in 3025, but now they're really, really slow. So they had to go faster as a result, just so they can keep up. I mean, when you've got some medium max going faster than lights, you know, they've got no place on the battlefield, or very little place. So there's that influence in there too. So.
I mean, we did have variants covering the other aspects as well.
Yeah.
I like my 20-ton mix to be like one-use tissues.
There's sort of a, how to put it, there's sort of like a backwards justification to the BattleTech writing process, where individual authors do individual things. I mean, like every project has a project developer, Johannes in this case. So. And they'll have certain guidelines, but we do have a decent amount of leeway. But sometimes out of that collective leeway, you know, that 10 writers doing 10 things, sometimes a pattern emerges, and then it's caught on by observers, and then that becomes the fodder for out-of-universe analysis. Like, oh, I can't help but notice all of these Merrick mechs are like this. Whereas now sometimes that's deliberate, and sometimes it's just three guys had, in that way, that same idea. And then sometimes we then follow that observation and then run with it further. Like, yeah, that's a great idea. And other times it's, well, that was a coincidence and maybe it passes. But it's really organic that way. And in a lot of ways, I kind of enjoy the BattleTech universe for that. It's not quite so centrally planned. So sometimes things that seem really weird, well, they are weird, but I mean, that really mimics living, breathing universe.
Why the shift to variants and configurations that hew to the what you see is what you get design philosophy? Is it just a tie into the new Kickstarter mechs? Some units really suffer, like the Sentinel.
In the 2 days or 1.5 days since issue 14 was released, I've only seen positive things about the Sentinel. But
Yeah, it's a massive improvement on what it was. So
How could it not be?
Yeah,
yeah, true enough.
low bar.
Yeah, very low.
that was the whole point of the exercise. Battletech is obviously not what you see is what you get. But we have this brand new Kickstarter, we have this wonderful new box set, and all these, well, little box sets with miniatures that, while not maybe not putting the full focus of Battletech onto the miniatures again, they certainly have an elevated visibility versus to what they had until 1.5 years ago. So that was part of the reasoning, and also you only have a TRO. You always have the featured mech. The featured mech, the one that has the picture, is the one that's actually stated, with one TRO exception where we had problems with that. That's how it goes. But a lot of the art, at least all the Kickstarter art, was pre-made. We didn't really have an impact on that. I don't know if Anthony's in the chat, maybe he can say 1 or 2 things about that, because it's been nothing but a pleasure working with the art department. But basically, the art that we are showcasing for the first time in the full proper TRO was not actually made for the TRO. So that's why we have a firm focus on what you see is what you get, because we still want that narrative to be there, that this is the mech that we are featuring and that the book is about.
Are plans for the rec guides driving new art or the other way around, or a little bit of both? Which I think you just kind of talked about that the featured artwork is, you know, kind of what is it's being worked around. But is that always the case?
Oh, you mean TROs altogether? No. Well, TROs usually get the art that they need and want. Usually goes from the development to art.
Guides, so.
Yeah. Well, we do have one new mech, in some cases 2 new mechs in every rec guide that are, well, new ilClan mechs. And they are our little bit of freedom to develop something completely new. And there's another exception in that, because we are also graceful enough to inherit the ilClan mechs, which are the genuine ilClan's mechs, the Clan Wolf mechs that we've been seeing, and of which some are not yet released, but the names are known because of Hour of the Wolf. And we did not actually develop them. We got to develop their story, and that was also very interesting. And that's also what Keith said. It's very clear that the designer of those was indeed focused on very agile mechs.
Yeah, so we had most of the mechs were from the Kickstarter, and we had the art for them already. Then we had these new mechs that the people doing Hour of the Wolf and ilClan Sourcebook were sort of injecting in. We're going to have these new mechs, and then there was just a tiny handful of we've sort of been calling them ilClan mechs, but they're not for the ilClan. So like the Inferno, the Lightning, that were brand new, but those are only a small number. And then I don't know how Joe managed to get the Asol in there and a couple others. Those were awesome.
I don't think it's a secret that we're covering all of the erstwhile unseen mechs. But the same rule goes for them as for the Kickstarter mechs. They are, if their images, are resurrected, if Anthony develops new images for that, then clearly we are stuck with what is the classic visual of that.
So speaking of Anthony, Anthony has shared some Annihilator sketches on his Patreon a few weeks back. Are we going to see it make an appearance in an upcoming recognition guide?
Yeah.
Maybe.
If he doesn't know, I don't know.
Good answer.
For the person who asked, the next question was just, I don't think the group here can ask, unless someone does know the answer. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was how many canon characters have been used so far. I don't think that we have numbers on that currently, at least readily available to at least me. I don't know if any of you guys know, but I wouldn't imagine that you would, right?
I just have a list in a Word doc. I'm not actually creating a spreadsheet of that.
Yeah, I know that I'm sure that there is a number out there. I think that's better answered by Ray or Aaron. Probably Aaron, since he helped a lot with the getting the back end systems working on the canon character stuff. And I think he's also keeping the file system for that, but I'm not 100% sure. So that might be something we might have to follow up on or try to post somewhere, maybe on the canon characters website page.
I'd love to say something about that, though.
Yeah.
Not in terms of numbers. That was actually something that I pushed for very, very strongly to get a lot of Kickstarter characters intermingled with totally established, very famous BattleTech characters, and some really obscure stuff from way back when into the spread of notable pilots to go with the picture. It might be interesting to talk about the whole reasoning for going a 4-page spread on the classics in the first place later on. But that part was an idea of showing how the mech has served over the centuries. And you will notice that some of them are Succession War era characters. And obviously we don't have any variants to offer them, but then we'll just call it like the Locust or Battlemaster. Because ultimately these entries are about the classic mech in all of its history. And we're focusing on what's happened since the Jihad, parallel to maybe some Project Phoenix developments, but we're showing the core classic mech. And this gives us wonderful bite-sized fragments of history. In general, notable pilots aren't just born here, served there, the end. We try to have a little bit of quirky history in there as well. It obviously can't possibly work across the board because it's a huge challenge actually coming up with all these fragmentary stories. But it was an obvious creative decision to do that. Obviously, I was aware of all the Kickstarter backers that had canonizations going on. But yes, ultimately, I did also argue in terms of what we could produce. I did argue that it could contribute to having a nice avenue of actually having meaningful entries in the canonizations. But the initial thought of doing it like that was a creative one. And that's because once I had that, I could also go back to remember how I said 3145? The initial way of writing, I'd actually disseminated that with all the authors, but I said, reduce the battle history a little bit. Focus on the overview is really important to me. It's just like one paragraph, but it kind of gives the feel of the whole mech. And also focus on variants, because it just shows how old the design is, how much it's spread, how much there's been done. And as you will notice, it's not just variants that we devised, but also variants that have popped up in the past 1.5 decades that have had record sheets, but never had any proper description. So I felt that section needed to be bigger than 3145. Hence, the battle history was smaller. And that was another argument for showing the history of the mech vis-a-vis all the pilots. So I'm just listening to what you state, Talon, but I'm thinking that there might be a lot of contention behind having such a list of Kickstarter pilots there. But they served us well. They let us tell different stories to what we are used to in a way that I personally still enjoy right now. I hope that the readers do too.
Awesome.
And if I might add to that one real quick, sorry. Those have been a great, as kind of Joe said, a germ for little ideas for those little vignettes that we put together. And for example, people came in with this little idea that they wanted to have something to do with espionage, and they wanted to be from different couple different people, similar scenario, same mech, different clans. It gave me a great opportunity to say, okay, you know, Clan Wolf looks at their watch as performing this function, and Clan Jade Falcon looks at their watch to do this function. It was a great way to kind of do a little teeny tiny compare and contrast of how these similar organizations exist in very different ways within the universe. And I thought I had a lot of fun just putting out a little tiny bit, just little nuggets like that, just based off of little ideas from the people who have contributed their canon characters. So
The best thing was somebody submitted a Jedi, just a straight up Jedi. With lightsaber and
I didn't see this.
And that's
Fair
now,
enough.
that's now a notable pilot in the Galahad, and the writer gave the character actually one of those Darth Vader hallway scenes in it. So everything's possible. Obviously, that's not the sort of the outlook we had on it initially, but the challenges have been a lot of fun creatively as well. Yeah.
I still wonder whoever submitted that general of some such meant it literally like I took it. But I saw that and I was like, okay, how could I fit that in somewhere? And it went crazy after that. But yeah, it was something like that where I never would have gone there myself. But I was like, I saw that and was like, wait a minute, that definitely could go somewhere.
I know a lot more about canon characters than I thought I was going to get out of this question, so that's awesome. Is there a set list of faction needs X amount of units, or is it more off the cuff as to who gets how many?
For some of the units, we did, when we were kind of going back to the design stage, we did put together a rough spreadsheet, and we were kind of just putting in the mechs and suggesting who would probably be the best faction for the mech, and then just looking to see that there were similar kind of numbers. We didn't want any one faction kind of dominating. So there was some thought went into that, but then you're sometimes limited by the factories of a faction, or the likes of it goes to the Sea Foxes, as Lance was saying earlier on. So there's ways and means of making mechs a certain faction, but we tried to do again different things with some of the mechs. So some mechs, the Enforcer, for example, is Davion, but there is other mechs which you may not expect the faction to be that particular faction. It's just the way things are worked through.
Yeah, I think it was more of write down where it looks like they would go, look at the totals, and then go, are there a couple we can shove in a different direction?
Yeah, it was quite an organic process, really. So
It was, but there's also the different chapters that we have in this. So like the NT and U mechs, which is what we call them, 3145, 3150, the ones where there's 3 columns in one page. Those are tended to be fairly organic. The Omni mechs were the ones that we really looked at, like Chris said, because some of them have never been done in the Innisphere. So we looked at the most feasible way of having them in the here and now, and also looking at factions while doing that. And with the classics, it was actually juggling. Billion was a huge factor in that. Just juggling what known factories there were and which ones had made a big deal out of going Project Phoenix, and the ones that hadn't made a big splash in the last couple of TROs. They were the most likely candidates for the classics to have been in production for the past 100 years, because that's what we always wanted to do. The new units with a rich history that we just implied, and even though we're releasing it now, they would have been around since the VR. So, I'm hearing myself.
Yeah, I'm getting it.
Yep. I'll just go on. This is difficult.
Who's doing it? Who's doing it?
See if anything comes up.
But so basically, that's we've got the Omnimix where yes, we looked at that, but beyond that, it's organic and dependent on the mech's actual history. And then we have the new ilClan mechs. They served a need, but basically you will notice that every clan at least gets one, and every major Innisphere faction gets one. I'm sorry, Periphery, you got the Hermit Crab. That's it.
Hey, the Hermit Pack's a good mech. I enjoyed writing that.
I love it, but it's 25 ton and it has to serve all the periphery. Because it's at one stage, we flip-flopped TRO Classics, then was TRO ilClan, and then, it's this big thing now. But TRO ilClan was part of the whole thinking. So it's clear, just every Innisphere major faction gets one mech, the end. And a lot of the movement is there on the clan side for this one, which is exactly the opposite of how TROs were done thus far. And the reason that we have, and then it depends on the balance of things. Like we got 8 mechs that were given to us before the project even started that were very Clan Wolf centric. And then obviously had a major Clan Seafox touch to it, but it was basically the one side of the conflict of ilClan. So that the reason that we're getting 3 Jade Falcon mechs is not because I'm wearing this t-shirt, but because we wanted to have a little bit of balance that way. And obviously this is, well, you know what happened with one of the factions. It'll be the last time that we have this dichotomy between the clans, between 2 major clans. It'll be different for the next TRO. But even spinning the story further, some factions get more, some factions get less, depending on what their actual current story is, and also depending on what just happened in the prior TRO, which obviously does not hold for the Jade Falcons. But yeah, well, we are still in the process of it. We're in the middle of the 3rd wave, so other factions will be served as well. Yeah.
What design philosophies go into designing the new mechs or variants from the back end? Like, is the design prompt make it a super tough but fast scout mech, or reach out and touch someone in mech form?
I know I received a couple of small lines of instruction when making the Sojourner and the Hierofalcon. I mean, it was just basically, okay, it weighs this much and it has this type of armor or something very generic like that. And I got to design it as I chose the rest of the way. There was a little bit of guidance on the ones that I did, but not hand holding.
Yeah, I had similar as well. That just here's a faction, here's a weight slot. What you want to do with it, to go to town. So, you can, success or failure is ultimately the designer's fault in that way. If this is a garbage mech, well, sorry. I tried.
I occasionally get told I'll have brownie points if I can squeeze in a particular piece of technology, but that's about the big extent of it. So.
Yeah, it goes back a little bit to 3145 and 3150, where I also had the honor of being in charge of all the stats. And in that other project, I looked at all the things we had to do, pretty much like here. We had all the Mecha and Dark Age figurines that we had to bring to life. And I did it as faithfully with sources that we had, and then realized, oh, look at the size of this project, and that's when I decided to pull in people and let them do their own thing, because I can't possibly guarantee a nice even spread of BattleTech. It's the way that things are compartmentalized in CGL, that certain people have certain absolute control over various little factors of the game. I think it's very, very important that the collaborative way of doing things that we've been talking about today as well just reaches all aspects of any project. Yeah.
I think for me, it was mostly Joe going after the fact, going, stop using clan tech on the Innisphere mechs.
Sorry about that.
No, it's but yeah, it was pretty loose. It was more of submit an idea and then see if it was liked or if it was told to do over again. But it was pretty open, like Keith said, just a faction or a weight class, and then design something.
We did turn your mech into an Omni mech with 11th hour.
Yes, yeah. The Inferno originally was not an Omni mech. I snuck in a Clantech variant, and then Joe said I could make it an Omni instead. So then I had to come up with another configuration for it. So that's how that one got Clantech snuck in.
Yeah, so there's an overall you take a step back and then review the overall lineup and then just tweak it. Like I think the most frustrated Lance has been with me in the whole project was when I took his beautiful Haro Falcon and realized it's got extreme parallels to the upcoming much later on, upcoming Jade Phoenix. And then I streamlined your design a little bit around that. But the overall performance, I don't think it's changed very much at all.
No, it's basically the same.
And to be honest, I also did go back to the Jade Phoenix and at least streamline the armor layout. Yeah. So you look at the project overall and you try to really see how various factors would impact each other.
Although I should point out, you made that improved jump jet variant. So when everybody sees that, that's you.
Okay. Anyone else? We good? We got it all? Sweet. Will we get more rare equipment types in the recognition guide? Blue shield, particle dampener, voice signature system, heavy velocity autocannons, etc.
I would think some of that goes back to that individual designer thing of like, nobody wants to put a freaking HVAC on their one mech that they can't. God, you know. But
Nobody in their right mind.
there's some elements of that, but I suppose we'll see. I mean, Johannes probably knows better than the rest of us.
No, but again, Keith, that's all you. A battle mech manual. That it really is, and for the reasons that Joshua said, it's sort of an in-universe thing as well. But obviously, if we go into the meta level, we are looking at a TRO that services a new box set, a Kickstarter box set, that's drawn in a huge number of people. And yes, there might have been old returning fans, but I'm pretty sure there's also a whole bunch of new fans out there. And they are not the ones who know all the thousands of pages of rules for all the various intricate pieces of equipment. We can point them towards the Battle Mech manual, and you've got them in the 32nd century, and that's awesome. And that's that's one of the main reasons we focus on that. And I mean, you did put in a huge effort to have all the feasible technology in there. I mean, it's not very exclusive, it's very inclusive, and anything that just made remote sense is in the Battle Mech manual. I mean, I think the most the single piece of equipment that's not in there that's meant to be fairly common in the universe are mech mortars, because they had like a page of rules or something.
Yeah, but there was some things I would like. There's nothing wrong with this except for the fact it would take a page by itself. But like remote sensors, handheld weapons, they were just awful. It just would not fit.
Will we get nope, we just answered that one. Did not mark it. My bad. Is there going to be any vehicles in the guides or the compilation PDF or Arrow? Yeah. That's about what I figured the question is.
Again.
The recognition guide is currently focused on mechs only.
Good question here that I thought was, did any particular mech inspire you, or mechs?
I can't say there was one for myself. I don't know about the other you guys. They're all sort of interesting assignments. Nope.
As everyone starts thinking to see if there's a mech in their arsenal that really inspired them.
No, there
It's
will.
maybe.
Go.
Sorry. It's maybe less inspired, but when we've been doing, particularly in my case, some of the NT and U mechs, it's again maybe getting to look at and reevaluate mechs that you've never thought much of, you've never liked the faction or what it does, but you see the mech, you see the pilot, and then you build the story around it, and it kind of gives you more of an appreciation for how it works as a whole. I mean, some of the ones have been quite surprising. The pilot entries we've had, we've then had a faction for the mech. I mean, I'm just looking down the list of the things, the bits and pieces that have already been done. In terms of the cataphract and other bits and pieces, it's strange the way whoever's wanted to pilot, the pilot's not been the faction of the mech, but then we've then had to write the mech into that faction. So it's been an interesting process. It's been interesting to work it out. So
I have two upcoming that I had to do the most research on because they were for the Sea Foxes. And we do have this battle history, and the Sea Foxes are all known for selling stuff more than their great battles. So that took me the most research of going through and like, okay, how do I present all of this for the Sea Foxes in those entries? So that took the most research of, and I also had not paid as much attention to the MechWarrior Dark Age Sea Fox story, so I had to go back through those to catch myself up on more specifics than just the general. The Sea Foxes are floating around in their ships and selling everything.
So it sounds like more. It's not necessarily sometimes it's not the mechs that inspire you, but it's the intricate puzzle pieces necessary to put a really good story together in the limited fashions that you guys have.
Well, the pilot entries, like, especially again, going back to those Kickstarter pilots, like, oh, this is great. I mean, the mech is the mech. You can do good things, bad things with almost any of them. But like, oh, this is really interesting. And then in your mind, that gets linked to the mech. Like, I liked this mech, but then you really think about it, it's like, well, actually, I really liked the notable pilots I put there, or the battle history we cooked up for it. And like, oh, this is pretty compelling now. But really, that's going back to 3025, where sometimes love of a mech came out of, oh, this is an amazing battle history write-up.
Definitely more interesting things coming from the notable pilots than just from the mech.
And it's exactly that so many entries have been submitted by writers that were in themselves inspiring, and it had little to do with the mech itself. That's very much the whole spirit of the project. And it really goes back to that with the Kickstarter pilots on the one hand, but again, notable pilots have allowed us to dig up some really old sources, stuff that was written in the 80s, and then flesh out the backstory to that in just a little bits and pieces, but sometimes it goes back into the mech itself. And that's really satisfying, and stuff that you love, and then you might forget the minute details as soon as it's put out there, but you know it's in there. So that makes it a special thing unto itself. And I think this is a TRO that's taken another step from all the other TROs we've done so far, because we have been working so intensively with the whole legacy of Battletech all the time. And the guys who just spoke up, they all talked about their own stuff, because that's what happens when you're in a process like that. You then sometimes come up with something that, yes, you design, you write yourself, but it's predestined by other factors. And then you look at it in the end, and then you're happy with it, and sometimes it's like, oh, did I do that? So it's not about being proud of your own work, it's about being happy where that own work fits into the whole scheme of things. Like the Iron Falcon, that shouldn't exist at all. But that's because of Lance's great work with the Harrow Falcon and Dale's great art with that.
Thank you, Manus.
That basically meant I suddenly had this light mech in my head, and it wouldn't disappear at all. And stuff like that ultimately you follow up on, then it gets fleshed out, and then it holds up. And that really those are the things that stand out. Do we still have Etienne in our chat? I'm assuming Etienne is still there, because Etienne, you also gave me a configuration that of the crossbow. It's coming up, and it's just so nuts and just shouldn't make sense at all. I love it to bits. So that's my answer about the one single record sheet that inspired me.
How is it determined the technological progression of the different factions? Example: clans making clan racks, or inner sphere power making clan tech, or periphery power making SLR tech. Is that something that you guys be able to answer?
I didn't quite hear you there, Talon. Sorry.
How is it determined the technological progression of the different factions? For example, clans making clan racks, or inner sphere powers making clan tech.
I usually try to throw something in, and then I have to find something that already leads into it. So if I can go to prototypes or 3145 and say, hey, they were already making that, or if I can go and say, basically just I try it, see what happens. It comes back, it gets rejected. I change it to something else. But there's got to be something interesting to it. Most of it is just going to be the clan tech is going to be clan, or the inner sphere is going to be inner sphere. But if there's something, somebody took over this factory, did they have the resources to completely convert it, or are they just slapping it together? Some of the wolf mechs have inner sphere tech with clan weapons on them. Some of the clan mechs, it's the clan base and they threw whatever they had. So sometimes that gets thrown in there where it's just based upon what resources. Maybe somebody's just being cheap and throwing together what they have. But there isn't a lot of, we just added new technology to anybody in this. A lot of it is that there was already in one of the previous technical readouts.
Certainly, again, writers get to drive this to a decent degree. They get to, like Joshua said, you can propose something, and Johannes gets as the final arbiter there. He takes a look at things and goes, well, yeah, I like this, or this doesn't work, let's redo that. But we get to try it. So to some degree, rather than a master tech progression chart, there's a certain amount, again, there's that organic growth I was talking about earlier on in the chat of, well, we've got this person, 3 different Davian mechs have shown up with these things. Maybe we can start speaking of the faction having this now, or maybe this was a one-off, and then we have to speculate, well, how did they get that? Does the entry even say? Well, now that's room for fan speculation, and not even really the writers know if they don't put it down. Or maybe they know, but if it's not on paper, it's not canon yet, someone else can come up with a separate idea later. It's really fluid a lot of times, not all times, but a lot of times as to how things can develop.
All of what you guys just said, and also to go even beyond, another level of meta. This is probably a good time to talk about the 4-page spread again about of the classics. The first proof of concept for any of the classics was the Marauder 7R, the first of the 2 variants in the technical readout. And that's how I first proposed we would do all of the classics. Mundane. Focus on what they felt like when you unpacked them from the box in Battletech 2nd edition. But have them feasible as something that's happened between the Jihad and 3150. State that they've been in service for at least 50 years, and have them mundane. Have them entry level. That was such a huge discussion behind the scenes, with Ray asking independent opinions of everybody in CGL. Because, there was a lot to be said for that. Obviously, the idea didn't die. But ultimately, it was, is this for 3150? Yep, they should all be Clantech. And obviously they aren't. But we've been deliberately pushing the envelope of that. We've already went that route in 3145, 3150, and we have taken it up a notch. So we didn't deliberately push it. We used exactly the methods that Joshua and Keith described, and then Chris. But we did push the envelope in some bits. And there's going to be some weird combinations still before we end the whole run of it. But a point is, it's merging. It's been merging since the Twycross clan refits had clan weapons on industry mech. Yeah. So that was 1990, I think. So we've been dabbling with that, and it doesn't make sense anymore to have this huge divide. So that is definitely, I think Keith used the word fluid. We definitely want that, the fluidity between the two tech bases. And it's not just erratic and chaotic. We are going somewhere with that. But, well, the Marauder 7R is how I envisioned the purity of the project first. And I think all of you were there really, really early on when I first sent out my thoughts on the project. And I think you might remember I said, no mixed tech. And then after Ray did his rounds and we had the huge discussion, and then ultimately came up with this 4-page spread and, you know, the whole reasoning with the notable pilots, as I said before, and suddenly had our new layout that we were happy with. Suddenly it was the opposite, as much clan tech as possible in Phoenix. So I flip-flopped a lot there. But ultimately it serves a narrative, and it does it by exactly the method that you guys said. We did look at what has already been established. Sometimes it was tiny hooks that we ballooned, and sometimes it was well established. I mean, we have the whole XTRO series as well to draw from. Yeah.
This might be a potentially a story question, so just throwing it out there as a warning. Any chance of the old Balakist designs getting some kind of revival, perhaps in the Scorpion Empire?
The old what?
Yeah.
The old Balakist designs getting a revival, perhaps in the Scorpion Empire. This might be a story question. I wasn't quite sure.
I'm not sure I understood. I understood the proper now. Sorry.
Lakist design.
Blakist. Oh.
Blakist.
Balakist.
Oh.
Sorry, I said Blackist. Sorry.
Okay.
Right, because they had some access to stashes of Blakist tech out there. So, logical question.
That is actually a bit of a story question.
Okay.
Went around the Mule interestingly, not the TRO project. We talked about it in the Mule thread, but there hasn't been a finalized answer, and definitely not. You know, there's genuinely no answer to that at the moment.
That's fine. Sounds like something that, you know, we can pin Ray on, which it looks like he's answered in the chat itself potentially. I see you there, Ray.
Yeah. Ray says, not likely.
Will Intersphere classics such as the Vindicator, Dervish, and Clint be making an appearance in the rec guides?
You're getting a lot of that.
As lore is a big and important part of the rec guides, do any of you know of the eventual plans for unifying tech bases going forward?
I mean, that's a classic. If we knew, we wouldn't be allowed to say in any case.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it seems like
That's
more of a
our
question that, you know, if
hypothetical
Ray is willing to answer in the chat, then may the power be with him. But I think that's above most of us here. If we're even if there was if we had plans inside of it, if we were allowed to answer that right now.
But I genuinely think I touched upon that in my last answer as much as possible, and as much as I know at the moment.
So the short answer is as much as allowed.
Yeah, I mean, mixed tech has become almost meaningless. I mean, with the tech advancement tables that we've had in various sources, it's standard tournament technology now to have mixed tech bases. So what it becomes in terms of narrative, we'll see. But the reality of it is that the mixed tech units don't get treated differently anymore.
Let's see here. As lore, no, but how did I not mark that one? I must have accidentally deleted it. How are classic design / models picked for inclusions in the rec guide? Did it happen to be your favorites? Were they picked out for you?
For classics.
Yeah, they asked how the classic designs and models are picked for the inclusion in the rec guide.
Kickstarter and all the unseen classics. Yeah. So that's the one thing that we did not influence.
Might be a Ray question, but is there any primitive mechs being produced in 3151?
Outside the Marian hegemony? No, because they've even moved to industrial mix.
Yeah.
And then we got
Well, we can elaborate slightly on that. It's nothing to do with the rec guides actually at all, but it was a cool narrative device centered around the tail end of the jihad. But it's basically an almost redundant tech because via the industrial mix, as Joshua said, we can cover or have similar low-tech units. And apart from that, it's always tech progression. You invent a new mech, and then you have variants that just up the ante. In terms of where it is in the universe, that's a billion question probably. But it's not something that will be the focus of any TRO at this stage, moving forward.
Why was the decision made to make the new Hour of the Wolf mechs appear in later recognition guides? We still don't know what several look like. Is that a Ray question?
Well, Ray, maybe you should answer that, because ultimately it's a question of timing. When I and Ray mapped that out, it was very early 2020, and we definitely did not want to one-up the Wolf. Definitely not. And we did a reshuffle of the lineup sometime during Wave 2, so all of the Wolf mechs will be covered in Wave 3 now. Because initially I at least wasn't sure on the whole timetable of events. So some of them initially were even in Wave 4, but they're not anymore. So the ones that are covered by fiction will be released as soon as possible. I mean, there's a big tail end. This current wave was written at the start of the year. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a new thing. I mean, older novels always would have one or two name drops of new mechs that we wouldn't see until following TRO came out.
Defiance. That took, what, a decade?
Which one?
Defiance.
So I might botch the name on this. And this was asked really early on. We've had a lot of questions since this was asked. Which one of you is Zotl? There you go. Hands raised right there. How do you decide what weapons are built where? Do you have a list of factories and what they make? How deep is the corporate lore you work with when writing mechs up?
Chris wants that one, right?
Well, not really. How deep is the lore? If we go back to the earliest versions, I suppose it's TL3025 itself. The biggest list of components, I suppose, would have been objective raids. So, in a lot of cases, it's just pure hard research. Just looking through PDF after PDF and trying to work out what was where and take it from there. I mean, you can tell by certain factions have certain components, so you can kind of assume that potentially that those will be used on their version of a mech. Whereas one example that comes to mind is the Phoenix Hawk in Objective Raids. It has different chassis of endo steel for the Davion and I believe Kyoto versions. So depending on where the mech was produced, you would have a name for a component or not. So in some cases, we've then invented different names based on faction and or also where it's produced in different factories too. So sometimes it's lore, sometimes it's making it up. And it's just, yeah, a lot of work in some cases.
Now, guess who's the poor sod who went through hundreds of units and hundreds of items of equipment and either had to fact check or find them altogether, or sometimes even invent them. 3 guesses.
I think the tracking on that in general has really advanced in the past probably 15 years or so. Like there's been more and more of an effort behind the scenes to track stuff like that. I mean, to some degree that becomes more and more of a necessity as more and more books come out. But yeah, it's a lot better than sort of the ad hoc ways in which you might have operated, 20 years ago. A lot of older, especially FASA era stuff where it's just sort of, yeah, whatever, this looks good, sure.
It's also it's a level of granularity in it that goes into the obsessive. It's I realized that I had
Too
taken
obsessive.
a big step forward as a BattleTech fan altogether when I started even paying attention to the factories where the mechs themselves were built. And then when you go down into the next rabbit hole, you tend to be one of like a couple of dozen people on this planet who really, really hit that very hard. And it's very interesting that it's actually a very lively topic on the forums. But realistically, that's not your usual BattleTech fan. And the deeper you dive, the more you realize that ultimately it's a fictional universe and it might have not been mapped out from the beginning altogether. So, I mean, Objective Raids is a treasure trove, but it's I just remember from when I started BattleTech in the mid-90s, I was already told. Sorry?
It's not the be-all and end-all, it isn't, so.
And I was told when I started BattleTech in the mid-90s, I was told, really cool book, but full of errors. And that was already the image it had back then. So you write yourself into a hole.
Yeah.
Well, I think those components are one of those things where everybody sort of appreciates they're there. It makes more of an impact when you see them there, and it's not just a medium laser.
Yeah.
But there's a much smaller group of people that are actually paying attention to, wait a minute, that's the same one that was on this one, which was on that one, but this one changed model numbers. That's a much smaller group of people that are interested in that detail. But it sort of helps everybody to have that there and to create that immersion and depth into the universe.
So not everybody else gets a sense of pride when they see their NovaCat lasers spreading out amongst all the other factions production mechs like I do? Is that just me?
It is weird going back to like the original 3050 and not seeing them there. I'm like, really? What? How did they not have them?
Those things drive me up the wall after a while, though, because you just get, oh God, that was the wrong chassis for the Brotherhood of Randus in the fall of 3096. Like, you're spending so much time on something that offers such a small return. You're looking for consistency for the sake of consistency, I feel, after a certain point. Consistency is important, but I mean, you always try to think of the Mystery Science Theater theme in some ways, and other ways that it's just a game rather than a show.
Yeah, if it takes the fun out of things, then it's really no fun. I mean, to go into another level of nitpicking, one that myself and Joe have looked at is particularly when we've had the new art coming out, we've then had to consider the types of weapon names. For example, is the MG, does it have a rotary barrel on it? Does it have multiple barrels? And then we've gone to the extent of looking back for a single barrel or whatever, just for the sake of consistency. But you can do that so much. But yeah, it's accounting and tech, and it's at its worst. It's hard work.
That was a note on your Phoenix Hawk to see, Joshua. Up until extremely recently, I deleted it just before sending it off to fact check because I had to make sure is it a rotary barrel or not. Yeah.
I'll admit I did not check.
It worked out fine.
We get down to checking like hyphens on titles too. Like, sometimes this is it a variable dash speed laser? Is a variable speed laser?
The dash between McAdams and Sohana drove me up the wall.
There you go. Writer problems. Yeah. So the things that keep BattleTech writers up at night.
It is funny though, even among groups of big BattleTech fans, how nobody can keep up with all of it. There's always people that have deeper interest into one particular thing, and of course, there's some people that's wider than on others. But everybody has different avenues of how deep that fandom goes for BattleTech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question, I'm pretty sure we touched upon a little bit earlier from one of the other questions, which was, what is the process of assigning factions to a mech? I was pretty sure that was just sometimes a faction is handed to you, and sometimes the mech is handed to you, and you try to assign it to a faction. It kind of goes both ways. I kind of remember that earlier question being answered, right?
Yeah, it was tackled.
There we go for that one. See here. This might be a Ray question. Oh no, it might be even Lance question. Based on some famous pilot entries of the Brotherhood of Randus, what is happening in the Tortuga general area? It is related to the Black Marauder from Lance Scrinsey's stories.
There is another story in the works. That's all I really want to say about it right now, because I'm a little upset with my hard drive. But there is another story in the works, and the seeds have kind of been dropped through a lot of the entries that I wrote for the rec guides.
Well, it was really fun to actually latch onto that with the part that I actually wrote up. So this goes back to us reading the works of each other and then working off that as well.
What have been your favorite notable pilots that have come out so far?
There was one that made me rewatch multiple episodes of the A-Team. So that was fun. I think that was one of the Warhammer entries, but I don't remember the name of it. But they wanted to be something similar to the A-Team, so I had to rewatch about 10 episodes or something to get an idea.
The things we do for research.
Well, going back into some of the deep cuts, what was it, Joe? The Green Knight for the Archer?
Mm-hmm.
You pulled out, that was a fun one, coming out of one of the old TCI model kits as kind of a source for that. So that was nice.
The one regret I have is remembering Sandusky Sorrel after literally like 2 days after the Shadowhawk had been published. That's my biggest regret of not including one of the obscure sources, because he was like a running character in Battle Technology. Tales of the Cobalt Coil had a Shadowhawk pilot named Sandusky Sorrel. So that's a regret I have about not including one pilot. But akin to him, we have a whole bunch of others. The Green Knight, there's a fun thing with locusts coming up. And we are having fun with these, but I think it's really important to note a few people have submitted canonizations of Dearly Departed. And I cannot describe how seriously we take that. It is an honor to be putting those people into our universe, our shared universe. And that is very important to me. And the first time I gave one out of these out as an assignment, I looked at it 3 times, and I was very I was moved by the result, and I felt it lived up to what could be hoped for. And I've seen at least one person speak up on Facebook, but to anybody who's listening, we aren't just about fun and games. We take these people that we describe seriously whenever it is warranted. Some submissions are obviously just fun and games, and we are having fun with that. Yeah.
Well, geez, you just ruined my call up for the fact that I had lost a cat, and slipped her in as a canonization of a mech name. Way to steal thunder there, Joe, with something serious.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
Yeah, but important, very important. It's an honor to do that sort of stuff. It really is.
Yeah, it is something different about doing these notable pilots, is realizing that this is the ones that are based on Kickstarter backers. This is something important to that person that they wanted done. So that's why I've probably done more research on them, because I'm like, if somebody asks for something, it's not I wasn't saying, oh, I want to base this person on something from the A team. They wanted it, so I needed to go find out what it is that they were looking for there. So on all of them, I was like, I always read it afterwards and go, do I think this will make this person happy with what they asked for? Because I the first instinct is I just got to write it for BattleTech. This is a job I have to do. I have to make something that Joe is not going to refuse to talk to me again because I ruined it for him. But then afterwards I go back and like, okay, like wondering about that general of some such, if that person actually meant that literally. And I decided, yeah, I think they did. So we're going to go with it. And so like Joe was saying, when it's something serious like that, you need to read through it afterwards and go, did this match what this person was asking for?
Before we go on to the next question, just to follow up on one of the things, just because Keiyu didn't hear. Keiyu, Kitizawa, just letting the faction question that you had asked was that sometimes the faction is just assigned to them, so they're already working with the faction on hand, and sometimes they're just given a mech or some generic details, and then they try to find a faction that works with what they've been given or find the best fit for it. And sometimes, but most of the time it seems like it's assigned and not usually within their control. But there's obviously two sides of the coin. So sorry if you didn't hear that earlier. Going to the next one. What are your favorite bits of lore you've been able to insert into canon through this project? If any.
I don't really choose favorites. I just go with whatever. But
I suppose in some cases it depends on what exists, how much whatever mech you're writing, how much it's previously appeared in canon, whether or not there's historical pilots for it or little nuggets around it. Sometimes the research just turns up little bits and pieces which are kind of worth re-including. So, but other times you get to kind of expand and go from what already exists.
yeah, now that I think of it, like when I did the OSSCOUT entry, I incorporated the error from 3025 where the OSSCOUT and the OSSOL had their art changed out.
Yeah.
I thought, I could maybe make that work. So put a little historical perspective in there.
Mine would be Velasek's Battlemaster Party Wagon. I was really happy with that. I think that was fun, which is basically turning into a thing full of beer and broads and marching around as a pirate king, being, living the pirate life. I was happy with that.
As I say, I think we did the unofficial confirmation of the Conjurer being basically the Wolverine 2C, which was a nice little slip in there. And if I remember correctly, Joe, we had a very creative name for one of the variants of that while we were working it together.
Do you still remember that?
It was like the Wolf Hawk Shockwave something.
No, it was Wolver Hardwave.
Wolver Hardwave, yes.
Yeah, it's been a journey, and as I said, I love getting all these bits and pieces in, and there's so much diligence about making the whole tapestry. We've talked about that at least twice before. So I think this TRO is really special in that count to really flesh out history, yes, of the past 100 years, but basically of the history of the battle mech altogether. And little exciting tidbits come up all the time. One of the things that I've been excited to do, though, is Phil Lee has been writing some of these things, especially some of the Jane Falcon mechs. And he's had a little bit of extra knowledge, obviously, of what would happen in BattleTech in the upcoming year or two. And it's not that we inserted anything of that in there, but we had the unique opportunity to have a unified well, basis basically, to get it to all make sense and to work out in whatever future is coming. There's not going to be any projects on these factions. I mean, we're talking about a faction, sorry, spoilers for Hour of the Wolf. We're talking about a massive, very important faction that essentially also got destroyed. And that can be a nightmare in the upcoming years. If we do something now that just won't fit at all in what's maybe planned or not. And I don't actually know about any of that, but I knew I had a writer there who would give me a basis that would not break anything in the future. So I like that. Made me feel safe.
I'm assuming this is be there. Are there mechs that are in the rec guides that aren't part of the Kickstarter or a game of combat box, like the Glass Spider or Goliath, going to be coming in future packs? Might be a Ray question.
Yep, Ray question.
All right, if Ray. Sorry, whoever asked this question. If Ray deems, I'll actually say the full question out loud in case Ray is listening in. Are there mechs that are in the rec guides that aren't part of the Kickstarter or game of combat box, like the Glass Spider and Goliath, going to be coming in future packs? Can we take this as a soft confirmation of that, or is this a way of officially returning to them in the post-Unseen era?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say sometime in the next 20 years.
I'll even repost it for you.
Oh, and,
That or Fusion.
and in terms of
I just see Ray make a smiley face. So
certainly...
Ray, if you want to answer it, go for it.
Writing, so I might say in terms of the recognition guide, definitely the latter of that suggestion. To us, it's just part of creating the lore, and the methodology of why it's in there. That goes back to the TRO Classics idea, to have this TRO to really bring up all the Unseens back into BattleTech. And miniatures obviously weren't any of our concerns apart from where we had to follow the visuals exactly. Yeah. That's also part of the reason why we deliberately went with the original 2Cs for the Clan Classics. Because we have all these high-tech upgrades for the Innosphere side of things, but we have the dual factors of basically a large pulse laser and Clan ERPPC has never been surpassed. They're still among the best weapons out there. They were highly optimized back then. I love the author for doing that. They were some of the best mechs to come out in all of their era, and were still among the best mechs up till now. So there was no actual huge need to completely create something new as the feature design. And also they don't actually have a home at the moment. We've got 3039 for the classics, and then Project Phoenix coverage is equal on both sides, but we do have, at the very least, technical readout 3039, plus extra coverage of the original classics and stuff like the combat manuals. Was it, Joshua? Where they first debuted?
Yeah, they did a couple.
Yeah.
So there's
the Succession Wars.
Yeah. So there's a lot more coverage of the Innosphere side anyway. So we felt safe, or I felt safe, but nobody argued that we could just feature the original Clan 2Cs. So any question of possible miniatures in the future, or of looking at what you see is what you get, just not there because we're following the originals. So it's not really a major concern to this project.
Were there any doctrines like more targeting computers, ECM, and other electronical and aim enhancing systems that you guys were looking to expand the use of in the ilClan era? Is it a Ray question?
No, am I allowed to say, Ray? No electronics. Well, targeting computers.
We'll leave it to Ray's decision then. Make Ray take the brunt of it.
No, it's actually a creative decision, though. There isn't some ulterior motive, but a lot of the electronics make gameplay more complicated. make gameplay less of a pick me up thing. So in our quest to really get the pure feeling of BattleTech onto these designs, electronics it wasn't forbidden to use electronics, but we deliberately did not use a lot of them. And the one thing that Ray did tell me, sorry for calling you out, Ray, basically no C3.
Ray says fine, talk, so
Good.
you're off the hook. In terms of specific systems, we did tend to use more of the actuator enhancement system. That's a system that's not been used in huge quantities previously, so it does show up on quite a number of mechs throughout the rack guides. So,
and tiny computers fine as well. Like all the electronics that fold back onto the unit that's using them, that they are fine generally. But all the area effect stuff and the electronic countermeasure and countermeasures and all that gets very complicated very quickly. So that we eschewed that.
Ray says, Joe, I didn't say throw me under the bus. So. Oopsie, might be in trouble later.
It's all Ray's fault anyway.
Yeah, blame Ray.
Well, the next question's a lot safer question, is what are your guys' preference? Large lasers or PPCs?
PPCs.
Is it clan all right?
Large laser.
No one here for the large laser?
Yeah,
Me. I like weird stuff.
Matt's
so.
a large laser fan?
I'm a laser junkie, except for whatever reason I have a strange love of the heavy PPC, but whatever.
Plania PPC is the best weapon. Prove me wrong.
Yes, but it's not.
I like laser range.
It might be the best, but it might not be the most adventuresome to use. Let's put it that way.
I actually sent Lance a revision request today to do with the PPCs, but that's way down the road.
Yeah, I'll get to it later.
Might be a Ray question again, as I'm not quite sure. Is there any battle armor going to be done in the recognition guides? From the startling silence, I assuming this is a Ray question at maybe some point in the future.
Can I go with my sometime in the next 20 years answer again?
Always a good answer. Funny enough, I do the same thing all the time when pushing a lot of these products like the recognition guides through our systems, is that if I don't know when it's coming out, it gets immediately pushed to 2077 until I get an actual release date for it.
Yeah, I think there's a list of things we'd like to do, and there's the list of things we're doing right now.
Ray says battle armor not here.
Yeah.
So I know this has been asked a couple of times. This is the one guy's been really wanting to know, is that what lunatic designed the new crab and king crab? Did any of you guys?
I say you're looking at him.
I was about to say, that wasn't me.
Very crabby man there.
You mean those
I
masks
love
of,
the
engineering?
crabs. I really love the crabs, but I feel basically everything had been done with them. And I did not just want to go the clan route with them. Deliberately, I wanted to push the envelope. Those two specifically, I wanted to push the envelope of what's possible to do with a pure IS tech base. And I wanted to go just totally nuts because all sensible and semi-sensible things have already been done with crabs. So that was a bit of self-indulgence, I must admit that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to write both the crabs, and they were great fun to write. So.
This is Ray. This is probably a question for you. I know you're in there in the chat, but if someone here knows it, feel free to answer it. If this setting is after the setting is finished with the recognition guides, is there any chance we'll see historical ones like an SLDF variant or Succession Wars? By the silence, I assume no. So I'll let Ray answer that one in the chat.
It depends on whether it's in the rec guides themselves. I mean, another avenue of late is shrapnel.
Yeah, it's hard to say whether or not they were saying if there was going to be other guides for the historical ones or SDLF, or they were just saying if there was going to be something else out for them eventually. It's hard to say, unfortunately, with the question.
Yeah.
ultimately we're people who take the assignments who are given to us. You know, the higher level questions, are not really, most of the time, either we don't know or we can't answer it because it's really not a department. We're the cashiers at Home Depot kind of thing. Or so
Apparently,
you
Ray
know,
says.
I'm proud of our role. We're very important, but you know, we don't direct things. So
Yeah, apparently, Ray says that's not on the table, but anything is always possible. Did you all pick up the TRO Golden Century? So I'll leave that.
And we're still only a little over halfway through this series, so we still got a lot coming out
until the rec guys are done.
Yeah.
Might not be you guys' question, but I remember someone was talking about the mech full page sets earlier. Joe, I think that was you. Is why not give each mech a full page set?
Each make a full-page set.
Yeah, why not give every mech a full page set?
We are basically happy with the TRO format that we've had for the past decades. There's been, if you want to see the future of that, of what's possible, but nothing of this has been discussed at all. If you're wanting to see something that's different, that's interesting in terms of what you can do with these established units, look at Legends. That was a fun way of totally of a totally different way of presentation. I don't think the 4-page spread is viable in any sort of general project. It's very specifically chosen to service the classics on a meta level and on an in-universe level. And I think the various aspects we talked about in terms of what it's meant to convey in terms of service history, what it's meant to do in terms of game competitiveness, how we can present it to present that rich tapestry. But at the end of the day, these are the classics. Yes, some of them, like the Ost series, were grandfathered in by circumstance, but most of them are among the most iconic mechs that BattleTech has ever seen, and they deserve something special. But this something special is not necessarily superior to the well-served layout that we have at large. I mean, you can tell that we never even talked about that. It was always about, let's do something special with the classics, the end.
How do you balance, so this is for the mech designers, it sounds like, how do you balance gameplay mechanics to historical history/story/vision to new variants and new mechs?
that's an interesting question because there often is a divide between who makes the mech and who writes the fluff. So sometimes you create something and then you're like, well, I wonder what they're going to do with this. And other times you're like, you get handed someone's creation. I tended to do more writing for the entries and designing. So like, what do I do with this? How do I bring this to life? So there can be a strong dichotomy there. Once in a while, you get something weird. Like I designed a mech. I designed the cricket. I called it the Rowena because it was named after, a disgraced ISF figure, and I'm chuckling. I'm like, oh, this should be funny. I wonder, poor sucker who gets to write this up, how are you going to explain a Cretan fellow, who's going to make a mech after such a disgrace? Why is it named like that? I can't wait to see what the writer does. And then Johannes calls me up and says, well, we need you to write that. Like, damn it, damn you pesky useless. But yeah, so long story short, I don't know how often it is that the one person does the designing and the writing. I know with the rest of you guys, did you get a lot of that? Or I only had it the once.
Just the one, I think, that I had.
Say not on this project. So
yeah, bits and pieces. I mean, some, as you say, Keith, it's some you design and kind of some you write, but there's kind of fun from going both ways. But I think the biggest limitation in some aspects has been whether it's been that to go with what you see is what you get, because that's kind of limited the potential weapons that we can then put on the mech and work from there within the various areas it's in. So it's been a fun challenge in some cases, but sometimes it has been darned hard work. So
How do the TRO writers interact with the fact-checking team?
Often the same.
I write something, I send
We
it
are
to
the
Joe, and he
fact-checking
interacts.
team,
Yeah, a lot of the guys on here and in the writing, among the writers are fact checkers themselves. But we go through a rigorous process going in. This is not. I mean, the whole endeavor of something like this, especially such a retrospective TRO, there's months and months of research that go into it before you even start assigning and writing and whatever. And then at that level, at that abstract level, even the stats that we create are fact-checked from the beginning. Are they feasible? Does it work at all? And we've talked about that in various places tonight. So this is very thoroughly fact-checked going in. And then we go through the normal process and get the feedback. And there's a couple of usual suspects who are wonderful fact-checkers who will give us extra. And I rely on them very heavily, and it's wonderful to get their due diligence every single time around. And often that's totally on me. Often they don't get a lot of time either. So thank you, especially Frabby. But
I think Eric and Etienne are in the chat.
But Eric and Etienne have joined the writing stable.
That too.
Yeah. So basically, what we have is that we've got a creative team at this point in time that just takes another step to reread what has been done. And we really, really appreciate any extra set of eyes on them. But this is very unlike a lot of other projects in terms of the research that goes in. And I was going to say that before when we talked about how this is a fictional universe and we're checking out all these different factors and weapons and components and whatnot. And I'm sitting here thinking this whole group of people invests more average research into this than I've seen at university. So this is it's all fun and games except for it's I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it, but I'm going to do it anyway. The pack that I called Ray out on the first wave credits is a suicide pack. We won't give up until either the project's done or we are done. So that all is very interconnected, but fact-checking has been a pleasure. There's been some bigger issues that other people have spotted in very specific parts, so it was not terribly difficult to rewrite some stuff. And yes, even so, there have been some minor oversights, like a new Avalon still churning out stuff for the Deviants. I don't know. We'll have a rata in the future.
Yeah, well, we check each other's work, and then there's outsiders that check it as well, and it's edited as well. You know, there's definitely multiple levels, but inevitably there's a rata.
Yep, always a rata.
Well, we got about 10 minutes left for the AME, guys, so I'm gonna start. We won't be able to get to all the questions, unfortunately, that have been asked. So I'll try to get to some fun ones here at the end, and then try and also continue pulling some out as much time as we have to talk left. So just letting you guys know, sorry if we don't get to your question. We do have them all written down. They do get sent out, so that way hopefully we can answer them in a different AMA. We're always doing one of these once a month right now, so feel free to always stop by in a new AMA and ask the same question. But we also will try to get these questions out as we find them, as we collect them and see them. Because sometimes, you know, Ray's got a lot of work to do. So, continuing on with our last 10 minutes. Can we have a lightning round? Well, sometimes it's a little hard to have a lightning round depending on the topic. I'm trying.
Novacat.
Yeah.
Will we get updates for the new mech quirks now that the fair number of them have lost the crippling quirks like no torso twist? Is that you guys? Or is that a Ray?
Or Keith.
Quirks. I mean, yeah, the quirk list is in the Battle Mech manual, but I don't know. I believe I checked with Ray on that previously, but you're still kind of being sounded out as to. I mean, because it's bigger than just the rules, right? There's connect with the miniature line and other things like that. So it's not really a simple question. You
No.
say that maybe the jury's still out a bit on that. I can't quite recall how the conversation went because it's been a little while, but
Let's see here. Trying to see if I can pull some really good ones out of here at the end here. Which TROs helped you out when working on the recognition guides?
31, 45, and 50 for sure. Seeing the format and the mode immediately came before.
and surprisingly 30-25, because as Johannes was very insistent on going back to directives we had back in TRO 3145 and 3150, there was an emphasis to less of the engineering discussion of like, well, and then these planners sat in a room and created some absolutely fascinating blueprints, and more like, let's get back to 3025 of, drama and feuds and blood, sweat, and tears and battle histories, actual, focus on battle tech rather than drawing board tech.
And then you also have the whole narrative legacy, because you've got 3025, an abbreviated version of in 3039, and then no actual law on the core classics, apart from all the blueprint discussions on the Project Phoenix side of things. So that's another reason why 3025 is not just as a frame of reference for the format of the TRO entry, but for the mindset of the core of this project. And same thing, the original 3055 for the 2Cs.
Yeah, there's a mention here. There was Jason Schmetzer had the original emphasis idea on that for back with 3145. The idea of returning to 3025, not like to copy, but as a blueprint for an emphasis on action versus engineering discussions. And yeah, that was Schmetzer's original directive. But it's really solid one, and I think it's one that TROs coming forward has really benefited from. It's not just a dead look at the past to clone the past, but what can we learn from it and mix with modern style, modern takes on things.
And
Oh, I was just about to say, didn't he ban the word design as well?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
Still in effect as far as I know for this. Design.
And he also wrote a mock-up TRO entry that's been passed around once again 8 years later for the people working on this project. So yeah, a lot of this goes back to the new direction that Jason Schmetzer introduced back in 2013. So definitely all credit to that.
What do you use to make record sheets?
To paraphrase Ray a long time ago, every bubble is placed tenderly with love and applied with the sweet kisses of smoked jaguars, or something along those lines. At least that's what he told me that I was going to be working on a long time ago. So,
but no, you can tell.
But okay, so we work pretty closely with the Mega Mech Lab team, have for many years, and a couple different developers, because we tend to make them pull out their hair every so often as we're trying to get it to perfect. Oh no, it needs to calculate this, or we need to shift these words over here 2 more millimeters so everything prints out properly and whatnot, and all those other happy fun things. So
yeah, thank you, David, also.
yes.
Do you playtest your designs?
Right, what
A little
if I
bit.
have anyone to play with here?
It's dependent on the project. Some of them in the past were right now, no. You just kind of wing it and hope, based on your previous play experience, you have an idea how this is going to work. But
Exactly. We do theory craft a lot of the TRO entries, but it's our specialty. And a lot of us also have a very extensive gaming history. And then there's new things where you just come up with a new idea that's not been seen and that can't be extrapolated easily. And then I will actually ask various people to have a look at that mech and try to run it. And there's a few usual suspects out there who will also do that for me very quickly. So thank you specifically, Luke, Robertson and Etienne for having done some actual playtesting in those moments where the idea is just too far out there. Beyond that, we do play, and we do have extensive experience in this field. Yeah.
Then I think might end up being our last question here, as it's for the collective group. If you could do a mech variant right now, what mech would you choose and why? I think it's a pretty good last question for everybody.
I would do an unarmed industrial mech because when I worked on TRO Vehicle Annex Revised, that was the innocent times.
Which time you worked on it?
Oh, no.
2012, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
suck.
I did it both times, so yeah.
I really wanted an Inferno with shields in each arm, so it had the heavy PPC in the center torso and then shields on each arm, but that didn't fit in.
I don't keep a storehouse of. I know some people do. They just here's a pile of designs I'd like to do, tinkered around with, and just ready to pull them up. I don't really have one offhand, but I mean, immediately it came to mind as like a pirate junker, taking salvaged longbows and hollowing out the missile barrels and putting like autocannon 20s or something in them. Sort of. This is a trap mech. That just popped to mind. That would be fun. I would like to do that. I love the idea of taking a chassis and trying to take something and you're like, okay, what would you have to do with this? What might you be forced to do with this rather than optimally choose to do with this? Those are fun. Johannes is making notes. Oh boy.
there's a project that may fit in. So.
I like the refit system. It's one of the fun things about BattleTech is that the mix of necessity and potential.
I've had a love for the level of this absurdity, and Joe can back this up. I've always wanted to do fluid guns as some sort of sauce delivery mechanism. So for sort of like an industrial chef mech or something like that. I keep trying to get that made canon, and it never happens.
You need to talk to Dale.
Okay.
It's got to have a Swedenese designer.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Great expertise, brother.
All right, I think I'm still missing 2 people in here for mechs. Favorite? If you design mech, why? For variant.
It's more a case of it just comes along as of the need. So we needed the 55-ton Centurion out there, so I wrote up the variant that's in shrapnel, and that was like a 2-week process from asking to it being submitted. But that helped lay some of the foreshadowing for the variant that then appears in the rec guides. So it was more a case of there was a need for it as opposed to anything else. So,
but if you could design your own variant, what would it be?
what
Goofiness would you make?
Kind of involved in too many projects for that. I've got a lot of plans in the fire, so to speak. So I don't really go into designing for designing's sake, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair enough. Lance, what about you?
Every once in a while, I like to take the construction rules and just think of how I can utterly break the system and make the most nightmarish munchkin mech imaginable. I'm sure we've all done it once in a while, and I've designed 2 different 85-ton mechs that are just, I look at them and I think, oh my God, what have I done? Because you can just do some horrific things in the 85-ton bracket. And I think it's fun to do that, but there are things that I don't think ever should be officially published. They're just awful.
Well, there you have it, guys. So that's going to end the Clan Recognition AMA, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and hit the bell icon and subscribe to the channel for more AMAs. Like I said, we are doing these once a month. Thank you guys so much for your questions. I'm sorry that we were not able to get to all of them. We try to get to as many of them as we can. Just had a fun little lightning round here at the end. So thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys next month for the next AMA. Ray, if you already know what the AMA is and you're still here, feel free to post it. And until next time, guys, we will see you in the next AMA.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
See you guys.
Later. See ya.